Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And it's been a while since I made a Moonkin video, so I felt like it was time. I've recently gotten up to rank 2 on the ladder, and my queue's pretty much halted. So I've made a secondary Moonkin, and I'm looking to regrind this one up. And I wanted to share that journey and some of the strategies that I'm going to be executing in order to get to the higher ratings. Because I know for a lot of players, you might have a sticking point where you really struggle and you're not able to get past a certain rating threshold. It might be 1600, 1900, 2100. It could be really anything at that point. So I wanted to document this journey and what I'm doing throughout each process so you can see what it takes in order to advance to the next level for your own play or just for your own entertainment of seeing what Moonkin can do right now in the patch, because it is absolutely blasting. So right at the start of the game, I love just getting dots onto as many targets as possible. Moonfire and Sunfire onto the Prez, Moonfire and Sunfire onto the Warlock. We're going to start with the Root Beam, but this is a mistake. You got to be really careful because the Entangling Root is a shorter range than the Solar Beam. So shooting that Solar Beam there meant that I couldn't root because they were maximum distance away. You need to make sure that you're getting into range to make sure that both those spells hit at the same time. Here we're stunned up and the Hunter is pressing damage on us, so we're just going to immediately Bark Skin when we're stunned out in the open against a Marksmanship Hunter. You don't really want to risk how much damage that they can actually do to you. It's just better to immediately mitigate it. And we're going to Incarnation and begin to counterattack. The enemy healer makes a good maneuver here by dispelling my damage over time effects, and the Hunter makes a bit of a premature move. Now, typically, Aspect of the Turtle is not a bad trade during this time, but unless you're really in danger of dying, life-threatening moment, you should likely save that cooldown. So using the Turtle a bit early on here means that there's now an opening for us to take down the Hunter in the future. We wild charge over the Freezing Trap to eat it for our healer, and we want to try and Cyclone out of the Polymorph. You always want to chain crowd controls onto the enemy healer whenever you see them. So right there, I saw the Polymorph ending. We can go for a full clone, and that chain was threatening enough that we got the Trinket from the Evoker. Now we're going to rotate our Cyclones onto damage dealers. When we have no CC for the healer, you want to make sure the damage dealer that you're not attacking is on Clone DR. This is the in-between phase where you're slowing down their assault. Here we're making sure that we're in range. We get a Root and a Solar Beam, and we're blasting down Star Surges. I'm going to use Warrior Valoon to get into Eclipse. Now we forced Emerald Communion. We get a Hammer of Justice, and again, you always want to chain CC. So I see Hammer of Justice. I want to cast this into a Cyclone, and with this extended crowd control chain, after forcing the Trinket, after forcing the Turtle earlier, we'll bash the Hunter, prevent them from moving, and we'll keep looking for Cyclones as we Cyclone the Evoker a second and likely a third time to make sure that we are able to take down the Hunter in those final moments. So always looking to chain CC on the healer is a really important component to climbing and banking up your Star Surges. And when the healer is on diminishing return for CC, that's when you want to start looking to clone any DPS that aren't off DR to mitigate their counter assault. Now, the next game, we've got the Warlock on our team. It's going to be a lot more damage focused as opposed to CC focused. You're going to want to just put out as much pressure as you can. In this video, I'm wearing very bad gear. Half of my gear is Green Honor gear with crit on epic pieces because of what I pulled through. So this is what you can do with very little. Game's going to start again. We're just charging in. Honestly, I should be starting in stealth. It's kind of bad manner to not start in stealth, especially against 2 stealth classes, because I can start from a Solar Beam from stealth. Maybe I'm thinking I'm overconfident because I'm playing at lower ratings or something, but generally it is better to start in stealth. Starting out of this is kind of reckless. We're looking for a Cyclone right away, and they somehow just let me get it. Typically, you're going to want to start with a Root Beam from stealth or a bash into a Root Beam from stealth, but with that clone, we're immediately going to Warrior Valoon to get into Eclipse and blast Star Surges out. Against Mage, I save my Incarn until after the Altar time. They're typically going to be able to soak a lot of damage in the opener, so we can maybe force some cooldowns. They end up not reacting, and this is something that's going to commonly keep you at the lower ratings, is when your healer is CC'd, disrespecting damage, and not using the Altar time to rewind that pressure back. So this is definitely a common mistake. You always want to be paying attention to the CC on your healer and then trading your personal defensive cooldowns in accordance with that and not disrespecting it. Anytime your healer is CC'd, you should look to either be kiting if you don't have defensive cooldowns, or defensive cooldowns and trading with them. And this will be enabling you a lot more success. Now you got the Hunter on our team. Main target is going to be the Mage, but generally you can attack pretty much anything in the open when you're running a double caster setup with the Balance Druid. So charge in again without going into stealth, pretty reckless. At this point, we're getting dots up onto the Warlock, and you can see it just immediately gets a CC to be much better to start in stealth. We get dots up onto the DPS, and we're going to be looking for either a bash or a Root Beam. I don't see a Freedom or an Aura Mastery, so we go for a Root Beam, trying to line up my Incarnation. He actually blinks back away from it, which was pretty nice on his part. He's got Altar Time again. We're going to look for Cyclone out of the Freezing Trap, chain that CC on the healer, and that forces a Trinket from the Paladin. So this is a major point in the game. We can then bash the Paladin with no Trinket and look for another Cyclone. On DR, we're still pressuring the mage. Mage is kind of in a position where he's kind of lining his paladin, but he does blink back to him towards the final seconds. You have to be really careful with your positioning around your allied healer. Now on their counter assault, the warlock's been left open and doing a lot, and he's actually forced some major cooldown. So during this entire time, I should have likely been looking to try and cycle in the warlock and stall some of the pressure that they were doing. It would have likely made it a bit easier for my hunter at this point and the healer to heal him. But I see diminishing returns are coming off, and I'm immediately cycloning the paladin once that diminishing return is over. And I'm looking to try and get 3 of them in a row if I can, while we're blasting anybody that's in the open and closest to us, which at this time happens to be the warlock because the mage is hugging the room, but now the mage is out, so we can swap back. I'm looking for cyclones onto the warlock. I can't CC the paladin. He's on DR. We can see it with the gladius. So I want to switch the clone to one of the DPS. Obviously, the mage is immune and ice block. Then we're going to use solar beam onto the paladin to start another CC chain. Unfortunately, Soul Shove without voice overlap here with the scatter shot means we're going to run out of CC pretty quickly, but we've got cyclone DRs now. So I'm just watching the DR on this gladius frame. Now that it's gone from this side, it means I can cyclone the paladin. In 2 more seconds, I can cyclone the warlock, and I can really start going crazy. We're going to jump in for a bash onto the warlock to stop him from doing any CC, put him into a cyclone, and then just pound damage at the mage. You always want to be doing damage. Don't worry about saving it. We're going to cyclone the paladin on the sacrifice here so it doesn't break the sleepwalk. Another word on the clone here is nice by the warlock. Unfortunately, it's on DR for me, pretty much to full DR. We're going to cyclone the mage now, and you can see with any DRs I have, as soon as the healer isn't CCable, I'm maxing out my DRs on the DPS to slow down any sort of kind of counter assault that they can do. And this is a really good thing to do at low rating because it's going to give more time for your team to respond to situations, and you're going to die a lot less randomly as a balanced raid if you're doing this, or really any class. Now the mage has alter time up. We're soaking counter spells. We're getting ready to try and get CC on the paladin, but our hunter is also dying at the same time. So I'm more worried about our hunter dying. So I'm trying to clone the warlock at this time and trying to slow down some of his pressure. I can use solar beam on the paladin, and I can use cyclone on the warlock to stop damage. And we should likely be targeting the mage. Now I'm getting feared multiple times, so we're going to bark skin, target down the observer. Really important to be killing this as soon as you can. We get a cyclone on the paladin and force his trinket. We're going to line of sight in the room here for a moment while the mage is in blessing of protection. And our hunter at this time, this is paying attention where your team is really important. So you can see the hunter in the middle of the map while we're all retreating, and he's going to take a lot of damage. You want to be paying attention to where your team is going and retreating with them, and not kind of being left behind like a sitting duck for the other team to immediately swap onto and start to crush. But we're pushing forward onto the mage. We're just going to continue to dump out damage whenever we have it. We can also look for a cyclone here pretty soon on the paladin. I see a silence coming through onto him, and I'm hoping that silence is enough. I go for a cyclone, but I get feared on it. The warlock does a good job of controlling me while the mage is literally at 1% at this point in the game, and I'm throwing any damage that I can at him. Mushroom, star surges to try and finish him, and it ends up being a tied kill. So during this entire push, I could have actually just cycloned the warlock, stopped all of their damage, as opposed to getting a little bit overexcited and going after the healer and trying to CC the healer and being stopped a lot. Just stopping the damage with cyclone is oftentimes more than enough. CCing DPS in a lot of cases is way more valuable in solo shuffle, since dampening is reducing healing anyways. So during that push, I could have likely guaranteed this as a win to my team if I just played a little bit safer and focused more on controlling the DPS whenever their diminishing returns were available, this being the warlock in this instance, so that they could just focus on doing damage and not having to heal so much. So we jump in. I hit the mage out from invis, which is a little bit better than starting in stealth. If you can start by pulling a target out, they immediately ship a lot of damage onto me here with an interrupt and a dragon flyby, but the hunter isn't opened yet, so I'm not going to bark skin. Now I see the hunter open in the backline with true shot. He's actually going after the paladin. We're going after their evoker as double caster. Again, you pretty much just attack anything that's in the open, and by catching him in the open here and attacking him, I bait him into trinketing my bash. I can now clone his trinket, and then I can incarn on his DPS, and this is going to put them in a huge amount of trouble as they're stacked up in the room. I'm going to solar beam the entire team and continue to just crush damage onto anybody. This has forced the trinket now from the evoker, the emerald communion from the evoker, and they're still kind of low on health and being pressured. This is something I saw and noticed from healers at this rating bracket, though, is that they let DPS sit and CC a lot. You really want to get an add-on called big debuffs. This is going to highlight the CC here on the allied frames. So if you're a healer and you feel like you're stuck at lower ratings, this is the number one thing I would say for the healers in this lobby if they wanted to make an improvement, would be to be paying more attention to the CC on their DPS and looking to try and dispel them as much as they can. Now it's obviously not going to happen every time, especially with no voice comms, but it's definitely something you want to look to try and do more frequently if you're looking to climb and you're having a sticking point and you're a healer. Now they've been attacking our paladin for some time, which I honestly, it's sometimes good to do, but not as double caster typically. So another freezing trap. I'm lucky the evoker ended up breaking that with a fire breath, or would have been sitting it, but we've got good pressure on this mage. We're just lobbing Star Surges through, we force his Ice Block. Now they have pretty much no cooldown, so we want to get crowd control onto the Evoker as soon as we can, and then this way we can either isolate the Mage. He's in stealth hiding somewhere, so we're just going to attack the Hunter instead. Again, always attacking a target, never not doing something. You always want to be doing damage. We get a Solar Beam out of the Cyclone. We've chained those DRs together. The Mage is in the middle of the map, and we're continuing to blast damage. We push forward, chain the Solar Beam into a bash, and this is a really good CC chain. We'll look for another Cyclone. That forces Turtle. Mage is going to end up flopping in the room to a Chaos Bolt and a Nether Portal tick there in the final second. So if you're able to line up your crowd control for deadly chains like that, it's almost certainly going to be able to guarantee you victories as well. This is especially important against things like Preservation Evokers, whose healing is very high if they're not CC'd, but they're very susceptible to it because they have limited range. So you want to be on top of them. Now we've got the Mage on our team again. Again, if the Mage is being attacked, you want to be more aggressive on the healer. If you're getting attacked, you want to be a little bit more defensive with your healer. So it's all dependent on who's getting attacked as to who should be kind of initiating CC onto the enemy healer. So just pay attention. If you're the one not being attacked, you have to be more aggressive and in a better position to chain CC for your team. We just get dots immediately onto the whole team. Warlock ends up getting Counterspell, Warrior of Elune to get into Eclipse early on this game, reposition, trying to get in line of sight of the Paladin. I see a Dragon's Breath and thought he was going to sheep him, but then he sheeped the Warlock, so I just compensated and root beamed the Paladin anyways. We get feared into the room, and this is where the Dispel thing comes into factor. We're going to Barkskin because they've used Death Chakrams. It's this little green icon at the top. That's a Hunter cooldown. It lines up really well with Barkskin. And generally speaking, in Solo Shuffle, people usually pop all their cooldowns, especially at lower rating. So it is just better as soon as almost the fight begins to use at least some defensive cooldown to mitigate the initial burst. And I'm watching Diminishing Returns. So Sleepwalk is on Diminishing Return for Cyclone. So I'm watching that green icon until it's gone. Now I have Diminishing Returns for the entire team. So I could either Cyclone DPS or the Paladin. We're pushing in really aggressively, so I want to try and Cyclone the Paladin. I'm not getting attacked, so I kind of have to be the initiator here. We push in, Cyclone the Pally, bash the Hunter, look for a second Cyclone, and get Counterspell on it, but it's not a big deal. We got the trinket from the Paladin, which was one of the main objectives to get through anyways. We're casting Starfires to bait kicks here. We get into Eclipse with Wrath, and then we get feared into the corner, and we decided to trinket this one because I haven't been dispelled out of a lot of things. We use Typhoon here to interrupt fear into a Cyclone and take the Warlock out of the game. The Hunter's now a little bit isolated as we push forward to the Paladin and look to rotate that Cyclone then over onto the Paladin. The Hunter continues to be isolated as we go into Eclipse, and we're going to just dump as many Star Surges, jump over with a Root Solar Beam. Now Hunters can Freedom Root Solar Beam, so usually you need to Cyclone the pet. I'm not sure if this Hunter was actually playing Lone Wolf though. Generally, you want to make sure that you're cycloning the Hunter pet. Lower ratings, I can get away with this. They're not going to use their utility on their allies. But as you start pushing up, you're definitely going to want to make sure you're removing any abilities to Freedom your Root Beam. I see Sniper Shot here, so I'm trying to Typhoon it. Sniper Shot's a really scary ability, especially on Clothy, so using Typhoon to disrupt it. We Cyclone the Paladin on top of Sleepwalk because I don't want any AoE breaking it. And the second DR is not going to be too big of a deal, but our Mage takes a huge hit in the backline. We can't really do much in the fear at this point in time. So I've got Diminishing Returns for the Hunter and Diminishing Returns for the Warlock. We're going to bash the Hunter, drop a Fury of Elune on him, and just chunk damage even without CC. We're just going to keep chunking damage whenever we can. We've got Root Beam coming up in 15 seconds. We're trying to bait a cooldown in this in-between phase. We Cyclone the Warlock. We need to dunk down this Observer before pushing forward. Observer and Siphene, these are really important mechanics you need to be interacting with as soon as possible. They're going to cost you games. And now we got DRs for the Paladin, so we're going to look for a Cyclone, and it's likely going to force the Trinket. So I'm kind of getting ready to Root Beam the Trinket, and then we Root Beam the Trinket. And we're trying to push on top of the Hunter. When you're pushing on top of players like this as Boomkin, you can use Stampeding Roar to really kind of like sprint your team and get there. So I wild charge over. I don't need to use Stampede anymore because the Hunter just disengaged in the middle of the map, but it can be good to use Stampede to chase people or to retreat when you're really in trouble. I still have Diminishing Returns now for the Paladin as I'm pushing forward. You get a full clone. He's got no trinket. He's got no bubble. Fury of Elune, Wild Mushrooms, Star Surges. It's not going to be enough. He is not going to survive, and we're going to be able to close out this round. And now we're moving into the final round where we've got the Hunter on our team again. We did get a tied round last time, so we're looking to try and get a win here. Could have been a 6-0 if I was paying more attention in terms of defense. This is why it's really good to just go back and watch your games sometimes as well to see like what was I doing exactly in these moments, because a lot of the time your memory is foggy and incorrect and trying to protect your own ego and trying to forget the things that you did wrong and only pay attention to other people. So it can be really valuable just to do what I'm doing right now and just watch your gameplay back and make sure that like was there any options or decisions that I could have done differently in order to change the outcome of a match. damage. Now we're charging forward, getting dots out again. We can root beam through Shroud, so we're just start immediately with root solar beam. This is just going to be some guaranteed CC. It's a little bit premature and aggressive, honestly, as I'm watching this in hindsight. We bash the mage in the middle of the map with altar. Anytime a mage is in the middle of the map with a hunter, though, he's going to take a lot of damage. So that's why I just immediately stunned him and wanted to pressure him. But as soon as he kites behind the pillar, we just swap damage to the warlock. Dragons flying through the sky. I don't have Barskin right now, so a good combo here can be like Battle Master and Renewal. This is a really good emergency heal, which I accidentally got out of the PvP boxes, but it can actually be really good in Shuffle if you're dying a lot. To combine these two together, it just makes your Renewal a much stronger heal. It'll buff up your Frenzied Regens as well and make you more tanky. So if you're really struggling with surviving, definitely try to equip a Battle Master trinket. In these types of moments, it's going to make it a lot easier for your team to recover. Now the Shrouds are over, so I really want to try and look for Cyclones onto the Evoker as soon as I can. They're a little bit trickier if they're on the move, so I'm trying to get in line of sight. I get coiled and intercepted by the Warlock, who then does a good job fearing the Paladin with that coil. But we finally get there, and instead we cast a clone on the Warlock. So I guess I shifted my gears. This is where I started playing more defensive, wanted to min-max my DRs on the Warlock. We get a Solar Beam on the Evoker instead, and we're just dumping in as many Star Surges as we can with CC on the Evoker. We Cyclone its Communion, denying its healing, denying its recovery. There's a good Massive is here to stop some attacks, but we bash the Mage, and look at that. Look how deadly it is to stun the Mage in the open with the Hunter. You want to always be doing that. If you've got a Hunter on your team and you have a stun, and a Mage is in a good position, or Clothy's in a good position for the Hunter, don't even worry if you have CC for the healer. Just stun them, and they will pump a lot of damage. Now it's forced the healer or the mage to run away. So now the Evoker is actually the closest target. So it can be good to swap to the healer as double range whenever the closest target. Now Warlock's the closest target that is in line of sight, but we're going to Cyclone them instead to try and get in on top of the mage. Now the Evoker has Shroud, so we're likely going to have to try and Cyclone this off or wait for it to end. And at this point with 12 seconds, it's more efficient to basically just wait for it to end and try and survive. So I'm using Wild Mushroom to snare enemies on the pillar. This is why I really like playing Wild Mushroom, is when enemies do this and they stack up and they line of sight, you can just you can snare them with the Mushroom, get a little bit of Astro Power generation. I really like it in this build. I'll have the build linked in the description down below. I don't recommend copying this character's gearing. Definitely better to focus on haste than the crit pieces that it ended up getting through RNG. We're trying to get Cyclones here off that scatter, but we get counterspelled. So we're going to Wild Charge with Bear Form. This can be really scary for mages as well. We get a Cyclone and a bash onto the mage, cross CCing them, cloning the trinket, and dumping down that Fury of a Loon with as many stars as we can. We can chain it into a root beam. We happen to clip the mage, so he can't move either, and he's really unhappy right now. He gets rescue shielded into a silence, but he's still taking huge hits of damage as we're moving around the corner with rapid fire, and we are able to close it out for a 5-1, and possibly could have been a 6-0. So you can see there's a lot of lessons in any lobby that you play at any rating. You kind of got to get out of your ego a little bit to be able to see these types of decisions that otherwise in the moment you might miss. But I hope this video was educational and entertaining to you. If you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, then smash that subscribe button. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.